Hello and welcome back to Bookmark Chronicles. Today I'm doing a review of my reading year in 2020. It wasn't a bad reading year, it was pretty average, which is fine. I tried some new genres that didn't exactly go well, but it's fine. I think this year is going to be a much better reading year overall, so let's get started. So first, looking at my Goodreads year in books, I read 48 books. My goal was 45, so I did pass that a little bit, which is pretty good. I tend to fall between 40 and 50 books a year, so not too bad there. 17,703 pages, which I guess is pretty good. I don't know. My shortest book of the year was Cruel Crown, which is one of the Red Queen novellas, and then my longest book was Warstorm, which I think is book 4 in the Red Queen series. Average book length was around 368 pages, which is pretty on point for where I usually am. I think most of the books that I read are between 300 and 400 pages. I don't read a lot of tomes. I have a lot of contemporary books because Jodi Picoult is my favorite author and her books are around that length, so that makes sense. The most popular book that I read was The Hunger Games, which is no surprise. I think a lot of us read it when we were younger, but also reread it this year because we wanted to read the prequel, which, well, that didn't go well, but that's beside the point. The book that's currently rated as least popular on Goodreads is Trading Secrets by Rachel Eccles, which does make sense because it is a debut novel. However, I really love that book and there are 2 more books that will be coming out. The second book just got a release date for summer of 2021 and I did do a full review of that book, so I will link it in the cards and description below. Highly recommend the book. It is so good, and just in the past couple of days I've seen that it's gotten 300 new reviews, so I'm glad that people are reading it. I'm glad the word's getting out and I'm really excited for the next book. My average rating for 2020 was 3.3 stars, which is, like I said, it was a decent reading year, not a great one, but pretty good, and that's pretty average for me. My highest rated book on Goodreads is Cricket Kingdom, and I find that interesting because I actually thought that Six of Crows was better than Cricket Kingdom, and I did read that towards the end of the year. That was my last book of the year actually, and I did watch another booktuber who recently read Cricket Kingdom and said they liked it better, which is so interesting because I didn't. So if you've read both of them, I want to know which one you like better. I definitely thought that Six of Crows was better, but I also tend to like the first book in any series, even if it is just a duology, more than the second. So let me know where you fall on that. My first review of the year was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I made the mistake of rereading it. That is definitely meant to be a one-time read. So the first time I rated it, I gave it 5 stars. Second time I rated it, I gave it 3. So if you read The Silent Patient, don't reread it. It will ruin the experience, I promise you. And then this is just a collection of everything that I read this year. Hunger Games, Vicious, love that when no one was watching, really enjoyed that, and Trading Secrets, and like I said, Cricket Kingdom was my last book of the year. So aside from what's listed on Goodreads, I did also sort of put together some stats and put them on Instagram. For example, in May, I only read 2 books, but in August, I read up to 6 books, which is more than I usually do. My average is about 4 because I typically do 1 book per week. As far as genres, this year, sci-fi and fantasy had the highest number of books, which is interesting. I am fairly new to fantasy as well as sci-fi, but I think the reason that it's so high is because I read the Illuminae Files for the first time, I reread The Hunger Games, and then I also read the Red Queen series, which has 4 books and then a collection of novellas, so I think that's the reason that was the highest. Overall, 45% of the books that I read this year were sci-fi and fantasy, and then 29% were mystery and thriller, which makes sense. So those were my top 2, and then there's a big gap. It goes from like 22 and 14 books down to 6 because the next highest genre that I read was romance, because I was trying to figure out which romance books I liked. That was not exactly a pleasant experience, but I did learn some things. And then the other genres that I read only had 2 and 1 books, like poetry or historical fiction. For books that I DNF'd, there were only 2 on that list. One was Silver Swift, which is an Audible original about mermaids, and it wasn't because I disliked the book. The reason that I DNF'd Silver Swift was because I was headed into a reading slump after reading 2 books that I ended up rating 1 star back to back, so I kind of just wasn't in the mood for it. I'm also not typically into mermaids, so I really don't know why I picked the book up, but then when I started reading it, the parental figure was just really terrible, and I just didn't feel like dealing with it. I'm pretty sure the book is good if you're into middle grade, if you're into mermaids. I would say check it out. It just wasn't for me at that time. The second book that I DNF'd was Carrie by Stephen King. This was the first time I tried to read Stephen King, and I just did not enjoy it. And I've been talking to a lot of people. There are some people who are like, oh, you gotta try this and you gotta try that. No, I'm not gonna do it. I tried, didn't work out, not into it. I don't like his writing. I don't like the way he describes certain things, and I'm just not really interested anymore. I may read Pet Sematary one day because Dasha did a review of it and she said it was really great. But more than likely, I'll probably just end up watching the movie instead, which is not something that I tend to say often, but that's just where I'm at with it right now, you know? I also ended up rereading 6 books this year. The first 3 were the Hunger Games trilogy, which I wanted to reread anyway, but felt more motivated to do so because of the release of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I read Silent Patient twice, which, like I said, not a great idea. And then I also reread Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. So yeah, that was my reading year for 2020. It wasn't awful, but like I said, I definitely think that 2021 is going to be a much better reading year. I got some new books for Christmas. I'm going to be doing a birthday book haul soon. And overall, I just have a lot of books in my possession right now that I'm really excited to get to. I think that for this year, fantasy will probably end up being the genre that I read the most of, just because of the book that I have on my TBR. So we'll see how that goes. So I mentioned in my 2021 reading plans that I did not set a TBR for the month of January, but I am still currently reading through the Shadow and Bone trilogy with Dasha and Robin as we are making our way through the Grishaverse to prepare for the Netflix show that comes out in April. The 3 of us will be doing a Grishaverse live show. More information to come on that, but let me know how your 2020 reading year was. Are you anticipating 2021 to be better? Hopefully it will be. I know 2020 was such a rough year for most people, but that's all I have for you today, and I'll see you in the next one.